And we're back like we never left. Oregon fans, what's going on? How we living? Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of the Ducks Dish podcast. I'm your host, Max Torres, Oregon football recruiting reporter and insider over at Scoop Duck on 3. It is Wednesday, May 1st, 2024. And we got another big episode of the pod in store for you guys today. Peyton Woodyard, the Alabama transfer, has been linked to Oregon. We'll talk about him, some intel from the weekend visitors, and much more. But before we get into that, the Ducks Dish podcast is brought to you in part by Ranchito Grill in Springfield. Not sure what your plans are for dinner tonight, but you should head on over to Ranchito in Springfield at 1537 Mohawk Boulevard. Try their homemade tortillas. They got great food, great environment, and they will take care of you. If you end up going out there, say what's up to Ruben and let him know that Max Torres sent you. Not rolling solo on today's episode of the pod. I'm joined by my guy, Spencer McLaughlin, host of Locked On Ducks and Locked On College Football. Ready to talk some Oregon recruiting. Spencer, how are you, man? Thanks for being here.
I am doing great. Ready to rock and roll, Maxwell.
Absolutely. Well, we are rocking and rolling here on the Scoop Duck YouTube channel. Reminder to like, comment, and subscribe because we're trying to get this thing back up to 1,000. This is where all my YouTube content is going to be now, so make sure to do all those things if you haven't already. So I alluded to it at the top of the show here, Spencer. Alabama safety Peyton Woodyard has entered the transfer portal, and then I was able to confirm last night some earlier reports from Pete Nakos and Matt Zenitz that Woodyard will be visiting Oregon this weekend. The former St. John Bosco safety will be making his way out to Eugene. He enrolled early at the University of Alabama, practiced with the Tide during their playoff run that ended in a Rose Bowl loss to Michigan, and then made his way out to San Antonio for the Adidas All-American Bowl. So this is quite the juicy development, if you will, Spencer.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy. There are a lot of crazy elements about college football nowadays. Realignment is number one. I think the portal's number two. NIL number three. But one kind of underrated aspect in all of that combines it all together at some level is a 2024 recruit is in the portal on May 1st, 2024. And like this would be the equivalent for Duck fans to have Luke Moga transfer out. Like where you now different positions for sure. You have a better chance to play as a true freshman when you're a safety than if you're a quarterback. But Moga got to the Ducks early, was a part of the Fiesta Bowl practicing, and has been here all throughout spring. And what if he just decided to transfer out? I don't know how those conversations go down. I would love to be a fly on the wall to hear, what a conversation is like between a coach and a player when he just signed and posted graphics and everything like a couple months ago that he was all in, all excited to be here. He went with your team to try and, play for a national championship and was on the sideline for it and then just said, peace, I'm out. I don't know. It's crazy. Now, there's a coaching change at Alabama, so maybe that's factoring in here. But Woodyard is a guy who didn't enter the transfer portal until the spring window. So he went through spring practice. He was showing up, going to classes, and practicing with a team, and now he's just gone. And this is not the only instance. This is a high-profile instance, of course, because he's tied to Oregon. He's crystal balled to Oregon in a couple different places, as you mentioned. And I think that you look around, and this is becoming a more common occurrence. And Oregon hasn't had that happen. We have not had a 2024 guy, and they can't go into the transfer portal now unless a graduate transfer were to enter today. But that, of course, wouldn't be a 2024 recruit. You can't go into the portal now. But I wonder when that'll first happen for Oregon. And I have to imagine this makes fans kind of look around and go, what are we doing here? Like the fans that get disgruntled at this sort of stuff, I get it, because that's a strange proposition to say your career literally hasn't even started at a particular school, and you were going to go play for a different school and say, no, I'm punting on that school that I just spent however many years fielding different offers and whatnot, and I chose to play at this school, but I don't want to be there anymore. But it's the world that we're in, and I think Woodyard could come over and be a fit at some level with the Ducks.
It's been an interesting offseason to say the least in Tuscaloosa. I think you could argue it's been a transformative offseason, not even just for the Tide, right? But for the entirety of college football, because we saw, I've been calling it kind of a mini coaching carousel after Saban's retirement. So I think it's not far-fetched to say that the coaching change in Tuscaloosa probably played some kind of a role here for Woodyard. And it is a strange occurrence seeing that he just got there. But at the same time, it makes sense just because the players have that flexibility to do what they want, and I think with a coaching change, it does make sense. Although it is strange that he just got there, but to look ahead here a little bit, Spencer, this is obviously shaping up very well for Oregon, seeing that they're going to be able to get him on campus this weekend, and he entered the transfer portal with a no contact tag, which tends to indicate that that player probably has a pretty good idea of where they're going to be playing their college football at their next stop. And there's good reason to be optimistic for Oregon here, right? Even earlier this morning, Scoop Duck's Justin Hopkins logged a prediction for Woodyard to commit to Oregon, joining Pete Nakos and Steve Wiltfong, also with the On3 network. And I think today's might be the day that I have to jump on board with that. I've been making some calls trying to get tapped in with this recruitment, as Woodyard was a guy that I covered the past 2 years out here in Southern California. And there's strong relationships at Oregon. If you're just kind of, or I guess if I'm just peeling back some of the layers here that I know with this recruitment, the Ducks weren't necessarily a strong contender the first time around when it came time to make that decision. I actually was in San Antonio the first time he committed. Woodyard was a Georgia commit, and then he flipped from Georgia to Alabama prior to the start of the 2023 season. So the Ducks had some momentum, got him on campus a couple times, obviously recruited his teammate Mateo Uiagalelei, who has been a star early on in his Oregon career. Maybe a star is an aggressive word, but he's looking good. And they are definitely familiar with St. John Bosco because you have Tosh Lapoy and a number of SoCal guys on that staff, including Rashad Wyatt. That's a big factor as far as Oregon's ties there with Woodyard. So I think if you're looking at this from Oregon's standpoint, you need some help at safety. You were tied to Jacoby Matthews earlier on. I said pump the brakes on that. I don't think Oregon was pushing that hard for him. And then here you go. Woodyard enters the portal, and he's going to be in Eugene this weekend.
Yeah, and I think the safety room has got at least some playing time available in 2024, and that depends on whether or not you feel like a guy can slide down and play nickel. You know, Tyshim Johnson has played nickel, and he's played over the top. If Woodyard can be that sort of player, then perhaps he, can find a role for himself. But I think Oregon is frankly more set at the nickel spot than they are over the top, because you can have Tyshim play there, Brandon Johnson can play there. We've seen Nico Reed play a little bit of that nickelback position, and you look at the two safeties that Oregon is going to put over the top of the defense. One of them is probably Tyshim Johnson right now, and I think at the moment the other guy would be, obviously Kobe Savage is one of them, but if Tyshim Johnson, let's say he's out of the game because he needs a break or got dinged up or his helmet came off or whatever, like, serious question, Max. Who's the second safety over the top? Is it Aaron Flowers?
I would say Aaron Flowers, yes.
Probably, because he looked. I thought Flowers looked awesome on Saturday in both coverage and just hitting guys. His body physically looks so ready for the college game. So if Flowers is on your two deep as a true freshman, then there's no reason Woodyard couldn't also find a way into that rotation. You've probably got Tyler Turner backing up Kobe Savage at the other safety position. So I think that there is an opportunity for Woodyard to come to Oregon, and he's a guy that was sought after by Nick Saban and company for a reason. Anytime Nick Saban wanted a defensive back, I'm interested. You look at Kyrie Jackson, who wasn't even playing a lot at Alabama, and he turned out to be an all-conference guy and a fourth-round NFL draft pick, along with the entire 2023 Oregon football team, not named Bo Nix. So I think that for the Ducks, the move can make sense. I don't know if it's an automatic, plug-and-play starter, because that's, is he a transfer or is he a high school recruit? How do you think about him in this context?
Technically a transfer, but I guess I'm kind of viewing him as a high school guy.
Yeah, I think that's how you have to see him. He hasn't played a single college game and you're watching, his film here on YouTube, he's got some tape in the return game. If that's something he brings to the table, great. Because I think Oregon's return game, I think Tez Johnson returning punts was good last year, but overall, I think the return game was pretty weak last year, and that should be a wide open competition. So maybe that's something he brings to the table as well. But the guy certainly jumps off the tape for a reason.
From my time covering Woodyard as a recruit out in SoCal, this is an instinctive guy, high football IQ. Obviously, you see some of the tape. He's aggressive. He's a hard hitter. I don't think he's the strongest in coverage. That's not to say that he can't cover. I just think maybe that's an area of his game that needs a little bit more help. But I agree with your point as far as him maybe not being a plug and play guy, but certainly someone that I think you could develop to the point that you feel comfortable putting him out there in the two deep, maybe alongside a guy like Aaron Flowers. Both of these guys were All-Americans, so I think that it could be fun to just see some new blood there at safety as the Ducks look for someone who can really be a difference maker. So for Woodyard, he's coming, coming to take a visit. You're looking for a new home. I think naturally just coming back out west makes a lot of sense here, right? The SEC transfer rule, you can't transfer within the conference and play immediately, is I believe what the situation is. So if you're just looking at the West Coast schools, you kind of have a couple, like 4 options, right? All the Big Ten schools, Oregon, Washington, USC, UCLA. I don't think any of those schools, not that he's been linked to them, aside from Oregon, that is, I don't think anyone's going to be able to have a better situation for him in terms of being at a place where he can compete for a national championship. And with those pre-existing relationships already in place, maybe USC, but I don't see that as a likely destination with what they've been able to do on defense recently, Spencer. So I'll see if I maybe get around to making that prediction today. But I'm telling everybody listening to the pod, and I'm telling you, I think it's shaping up very nicely from what I've been able to gather about Peyton Woodyard ending up in Eugene.
I wouldn't ignore USC if they want him. Like they've done a good job bringing in guys that can play. But again, I don't think Woodyard comes in and is a top of the line starter at Oregon. I think he can make the 2 deep, but I don't think he's, the first guy on the field on the back end when Oregon plays his first snap against Idaho on August 31st. And so for that reason, I just wouldn't overlook USC because they've got the same situation. They brought in Kamari Ramsey from UCLA. They brought in Achille Arnold from Oregon State, also his brother who's a linebacker, Easton Mascarenas Arnold. They've made some good moves on that side of the ball. I don't think they're fully set at their are on their 2 deep on the defensive side of things. So I don't think if USC is involved that they can be overlooked.
We'll continue to monitor that recruitment. I posted a couple of updates over on the Scoop Duck message boards yesterday. A reminder that you can sign up for Scoop Duck for just $1 and you'll get a whole month of awesome content from myself, Justin Hopkins, Steve Wolfong, and Chad Simmons. So if you like Oregon football recruiting, there really is no better place to be. Spencer, let's stay in the Trinity League in Southern California and talk about some other big visitors that made it out for the spring game. And we're going to start with Nassir Wyatt, the coveted edge rusher out of Modern Day. He is one of Oregon's top defensive targets here in the 2025 class. He visited along with running back Jordan Davidson and wide receiver Marcus Harris. And on Tuesday, I submitted my first RPM recruiting prediction machine pick in favor of the Ducks. But, this is kind of just like I think Steve Wolfong called it, some house cleaning, housekeeping. That was a prediction that I wrote back in November for those of you guys that have followed me for a while. But, everything I'm hearing, Oregon continues to be the team to beat. And I'd be really surprised if another school can knock them off the top.
Yeah, and I think that Oregon's 2025 class is going to grow considerably over the next, kind of couple months or so. And we haven't seen the defensive recruitments really pick up yet. I mean, pretty sure there's just one defensive player in the class. So I have that right off the top of my head.
Yeah, Matthew Johnson from De La Salle.
Yeah, who looks like a good football player coming off the edge. But I think that the defensive line recruiting has been such a big focus over the last couple of years. There's no way it's going to just suddenly be a light class. And you look at his film here on YouTube. I mean, he runs like something's trying to get out of him through defenders. He doesn't run at them or into them. He he runs through them. And I think that that's the sort of guy that Oregon wants to have coming off the edge, which is where he probably fits. I mean, he looks, this is my first glance at his film, but he looks like a guy that would be a prototypical outside 3-4 linebacker, but could also play that jack position in the 4-2-5 that Oregon runs. What you have Mateo Uiagalelei doing, Tatum Tuioti. I think that position is in a really, really good place. The defensive line in general is solid, but you can never have enough good edge guys because you need to be able to get after the quarterback. And for the 2025 class, I think Oregon is going to be in a good position defensively. I like the start they're off to on the offensive side of things. They did just lose a commitment from an interior offensive lineman, Sandman Thompson out of Florida, but I still think overall, the class will pick up now that we're into May, June, July is when the bulk of your recruiting class really gets formulated. And when you get most of your commits that, end up being the guys who sign in December. So I fully expect it to pick up, and this is the sort of guy that Oregon goes after.
Talking some Oregon football recruiting with my guy, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you so much for being here and tuned in to the Ducks Dish podcast, coming to you on the Scoop Duck YouTube channel on a Wednesday morning. Nassir Wyatt, I continue to think that Oregon's the team to beat there, and Spencer just had some good stuff to add there as well. I had another update that was posted on Scoop Duck this morning for 2025 modern-day wide receiver Marcus Harris, who has Oregon in his top 5 schools and is kind of in that process of working towards a decision. He has an idea of when he wants to make it. Looks probably like the early part of the 2024 season. So not something that we're expecting very soon, but this is a guy that has some clarity, has some direction that is in his recruitment. You can read the full update that I wrote on Marcus Harris over on Scoop Duck, but this was another strong trip for him, as we kind of have come to expect, Spencer, right? Not a lot of guys leave Eugene with bad things to say, but this was an important trip for him. He got to spend time around the players, continue to strengthen those relationships with the coaches, and a lot of people have told me about the whole dream school thing, but that really does seem to be the case with Marcus Harris. I left that interview thinking, wow, this guy couldn't have spoken more glowingly about Oregon if he tried. The Ducks are going to get the second to last official visit in June. His last official is going to be to Texas. So I kind of think it's Oregon and Texas here for Marcus Harris, maybe giving Texas the slight edge. But I think that that's just because I'm not sure how high on the board Harris truly sits for Oregon when you got guys like Chris Lawson, Michael Terry, DeCorian Moore, all still in the mix here. It's going to be a really talented wide receiver group for Oregon when all things are said and done.
Yeah, I said on my show today that I think this is the most 4- and 5-star talent that I can remember in my life, Oregon having stacked at the wide receiver position. I know there were some classes that, had guys like that. DeAnthony Thomas was technically a wide receiver. Josh Huff was a 4-star. Braylon Addison was a 4-star. But, I don't think Oregon's ever recruited the wide receiver position this well, where you're just picking up blue chip commits or going after those sorts of guys over and over again. Like, yeah, Oregon's going to lose a lot in their receiver room after this year, especially if, as we expect, Evan Stewart goes to the NFL draft, which he'd be eligible to do, and I expect him to do. Oregon will lose, or could lose, their top 4 wideouts. Gary Bryant Jr. actually could have another year of eligibility if he wanted to, because he, I think, started in COVID and then redshirted a year at USC. So, football. So I think that the receiver room is going to lose a lot, but look at the talent that's waiting in the wings. Like, I've always been a Kyler Casper fan. I think everybody likes Jurion Dickey, and I think one of those guys has to be able to find at least a role in the receiving rotation this year. You've got Jeremiah McLaughlin, who looked fantastic in the spring game. He had that back shoulder throw from which was a great throw from Austin Novosad, and Novosad absolutely crushed it on Saturday in his first or his second appearance, I should say, at Autzen Stadium. But I think this receiver room looks great. Junior Adams has done just a heck of a job raising the recruiting talent level, and then the development and production. It's all been there, and those are really the 3 elements that that I use to assess how a position coach is doing. How do you recruit the position? How do you what sort of production do you get, and what sort of coaching do you provide? What sort of progression do you get? Do guys get better from one year to the next? And I think that Junior Adams has been one of the stars for Oregon in that sense, and it just continues to be a really advantageous aspect for Oregon to be able to go out and get these guys to have for whoever's throwing them the ball from the quarterback position next year.
When you're evaluating coaches that recruit the wide receiver position in college football, there's not a whole lot, Spencer, that are better than Junior Adams. So from a Duck perspective, you have to be confident in just his management of the board. I can say that Chris Lawson is one of the most versatile athletes in this class. If people don't know about him, you definitely need to. 2025 guy out of Archbishop Riordan in San Francisco. He's someone that has the potential to possibly also play defensive back. In my interview with him, we also talked about maybe even playing both ways, but we know how rare that is in college football.
Hey, Charles Nelson did it. Charles Nelson did it, and he was damn good.
That's true. So we'll have to see what ultimately happens there, and if that really comes into play.
Was that a hook and ladder? Sorry to cut you off. Hold on. Run that last one back.
Yeah, that was hook and ladder, I think.
Somewhere Boise State is smiling. This is beautiful. Look at this. Oh.
Yeah,
sorry, I didn't know that was I didn't know that was on there, and I just watched that, and that was one more time with that play. I cannot be the only person who wants to watch this 35 times in a row, because this is, you got the double clear from the slots and then the dig cross. Oh, the timing is exquisite. That's so good. Oh my gosh. Shout out to the coaching staff for having that in the playbook. That was excellent.
Yep. We love seeing the highlights here on the pod. But the last modern day guy we're going to talk about of this talented 2025 trio is running back Jordan Davidson, who made the trip out to Eugene this weekend as well. Little bit of a surprising trip to me, Spencer, not because he was there, but just because I've been trying to figure out kind of where this guy is at in his recruitment. This was a huge fan. This guy was and probably is still a huge fan of Carlos Lachlan. And I tend to think that relationship is probably one of the best he has in his recruitment. So I think Ohio State probably leads for Jordan Davidson at the moment. But that's when you have to think, okay, this is an important trip for him because he's able to get in front of Dan Lanning again, meet Rashad Samples, the new running backs coach in Eugene. So maybe the Ducks were able to make up some ground here with Jordan Davidson. But from everything that I've been able to gather, it seems like it's Oregon, Texas, Ohio State, and Michigan for the coveted Southern California back.
Yeah, and Lachlan is going to be a tough guy to beat, but this will be one of the early tests for Rashad Samples, and to see if he can pull a guy like this in a territory that typically has been more favorable to Oregon than anybody else out west in the last 5 to 10 years. And I don't think we've really gotten a sense at Oregon of what Samples can really do on the recruiting trail. Like we've seen his track record at other places, and we know, hey, this guy's got the chops. He's got ties to Texas. He's been around a whole heck of a lot. But we'll wait and see what that first impact recruit really is. The Decorian Moore tinfoil hat has been placed upon my head more than a couple of times since Samples got hired to the Ducks staff. But eventually guys like this are going to come in and make an impact, and I'm excited to see what sort of recruiting success Samples can pull off as Oregon's running backs coach.
As am I. We got another running back we're going to talk about after Davidson to round out the show here today, Spencer. But for Oregon and Jordan Davidson, obviously he's a priority guy for them, given where he's coming from. I don't think that I think Oregon fans sometimes get too caught up in the name of the school, whether it's a St. John Bosco or a Mater Dei. That's not to say that there aren't talented players there, but it's just because you get a guy from that school doesn't mean that they're going to be a bona fide stud. So just look at the track record and look at where some of these guys have gone. I think the best one right now, you have obviously Amon-Ra St. Brown. And who else do you have? You got Trent McDuffie, who just won a Super Bowl with the Chiefs. So these are two premier schools that the Ducks have made an absolute priority on the trail. So great to get Jordan Davidson back on campus. I'm going to try to see if I can get an interview with him still just to see what he thought of Rashad Samples. But that's kind of my pulse about where things stand and what schools you have to watch for here with Jordan Davidson. But there's one more back that I want to talk about here today, Spencer, and that is Altov Catholic running back DeAndre Hill out of the beautiful state of Illinois, Belleville specifically. DeAndre Hill Jr., 2025 running back that made it
By
out.
the way, that's Big Ten Brethren State, Illinois to you.
There you go. Yeah, that is Big Ten.
That's our
country,
conference.
As is Eugene, Oregon, Big Ten country. But
Huge.
Man, this guy is an absolute stud, and he made it back out to Eugene for a visit. Again, I have a full update with quotes from DeAndre Hill over on Scoop Duck. I gotta get used to saying that if you want to check it out. But this trip couldn't have gone much better, Spencer, for Oregon and DeAndre Hill, because this is a guy that told me after his last visit, which was his first to Oregon, that Oregon was his top school. And the big update coming out of this, Oregon is still the team to beat. Loved meeting with Rashad Samples. He had a really personalized approach to that interaction, the one-on-one meeting with him and his family, showing what he does at practice, showing what he does at workouts, and kind of tailoring that, showing pieces of that really apply to De'Aaron's game. And that was kind of what he told me made that interaction with Samples super, super special. So Oregon's in a great spot coming out of this trip for DeAndre Hill, and this dude is a versatile back that I'm sure Duck fans would love to have.
Yeah, and anybody watching his huddle highlights for the first time will see that so far he hasn't put anything at the running back position on his highlight reel. Plays a little safety, plays a little wide receiver, and look, I'm here for guys that can move around a little bit, because you never know what transfers are going to come into the program, or what your high school recruiting class looks like, what your depth chart is, and having a guy that can shift around a bit, I think is always an advantage. And for a guy as talented as Hill, I think that's even better, because it's not some guy who's trying to find a home at a position because he isn't good enough at any of them, but just because he could go and play a couple of different spots. But big time, big play sort of player, special teams, special plays, special players. I didn't even mean to work that in. It just kind of happened. But again, I'm curious to see what
that was an insane play. I'm sorry. That
was pretty crazy.
What the heck just happened there?
Off one hand, two hands, and then he turns around. Oh man, that's a heck of a catch. But yeah, I mean, all these names are guys that Oregon fans should start to get familiar with, because they're going to be in the Ducks' pursuits over the next couple of months, and eventually commitments are going to come down the line.
And DeAndre Hill has an official visit set to Oregon. I can't remember the date off the top of my head. It's in the story, but it's in the month of June. Only other official visit he has set right now is to Illinois, but Carlos Lachlan has offered him at Ohio State, and I expect him to be involved there. But really the biggest takeaway for me after this trip, Spencer, was that the Lachlan departure and subsequent Samples hire didn't do anything to hurt Oregon's chances here. And On 3, Steve Wiltfong placed an RPM yesterday in favor of the Ducks to land DeAndre Hill, and I might just have to join him in that selection as well, because this is a guy that loves Oregon, can't get enough. His parents love it, and man, he's a huge priority. So I know Oregon wants to take probably another 2 backs in this class. At least that was the plan, I think, under Lachlan. So we'll see if the approach changes at all for Samples, but great spot here for DeAndre Hill. And I think that this is a guy that you're definitely going to want to make sure and track where he goes on the recruiting trail now coming out of this trip to Eugene.
Yeah, I think so. And, just that sort of explosive player is somebody who you always want to try and add to the backfield, because, he's being courted by some big-time schools for a reason. And I expect Oregon to be able to compete. I don't think there's anyone really that can just, out-recruit Oregon, where like, oh, this school got in the mix and, well, now they just don't have a chance. And, you can have that with individual relationships when you have a coaching change, but I think Rashad Samples is going to prove to be a really, really good hire for the Ducks.
Last note I'll add here on Hill is that some of the sources I talked to about this recruitment kind of told me that Oregon looks at him a little bit like a Jahmyr Gibbs style of back. And I think watching his tape here and seeing the versatility, Spencer, the burst and explosiveness, I think that is a comp that certainly seems realistic for this talented Illinois product. But Oregon had a great recruiting weekend coming out of that spring game. I think that the things are going to start to get rolling, I should say, in the 2025 class for the Ducks and Dan Lanning. So positive updates. We'll see what happens with Woodyard. Also, keep an eye on the Ducks for Derek Harmon, the Michigan State defensive lineman. Hasn't been a ton of updates on that recruitment, but I think Oregon is still involved there. Last update that I forgot to mention, I wanted to talk about it with Woodyard. Colin Gill entered the transfer portal yesterday. Redshirt freshman DB that signed with the Ducks out of Washington, D.C. So they're managing that roster as they kind of also manage the portal, incoming guys, outgoing guys. But I think everything is in a good spot right now in Eugene when you're just looking at the overall scope of things.
Yeah, I think it's hard to not like where, Oregon's at recruiting wise in 2025. They I think are in the top 20 right now. It's still really early. The class is going to get filled out, but Dan Lanning and company have set the standard. Like anything outside of a top 10 class would probably be seen as a disappointment every single year. That's the way they've brought in players at a variety of positions. Certainly the defensive line's been the hallmark of some of the biggest names that they've landed over the years, but I think going forward, it's that's the floor. That's the standard, is be inside the top 10. And, a really, really good class like this last one gets inside the top 5 nationally. So that's where I expect Oregon to be again, because they're in a good position with a lot of blue chip recruits. And I think they're just going to be able to keep the momentum rolling.
Oregon has done such a good job bringing guys in, going out on the road to see guys. The coaches are out on the road again, Spencer, as we kick off the month of May. So that's another important development to track with high school programs across the country. And I'm sure here locally for me in SoCal are going to kick off spring practice. And then those obviously culminate with the spring showcase. That's really when these coaches can get in front of these guys. But Oregon has the ability and I think the luxury to be selective with who they take commitments from. And I think this has another chance to be a really special group for Dan Lanning and company. Before we get out of here, Spencer, let the people know where they can find more of you and what you have going on in this space.
Yeah, I host Locked On Ducks and Locked On College Football Monday through Friday on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. I'm on X at McLaughlin CFB. And my man, Max, it is always great to be considered a frequent guest and friend of the show here for you. So thanks for having me back on.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, make sure you guys tap in, lock in with Spencer. And then after you do that, lock in with me on social media at Torres Sports on X, formerly known as Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Subscribe to the Scoop Duck YouTube channel and let me know what you're thinking in the comments about Oregon football recruiting. Sign up for scoopduck.com. $1 promo still going right now. Best Oregon recruiting stuff you'll find out there on the web. And then share the show, share the Ducks Dish podcast with your friends, with your family, and with other Duck fans. A big thank you to Spencer for coming on. Thank you to you guys for talking some Duck football and Duck recruiting with us. And we'll see you in the next episode of the Ducks Dish podcast.